Just to start off with here, with just to go over the learning objectives for today. As Chris mentioned, I'll start off today talking to you about nonprofit trends within that are going on right now that are affecting nonprofit organizations, especially around data analytics. I'll be joined by Ann Hartman, who has a deep experience within this area and can provide some personal stories about how she took analytics to improve her organization. Then I'll turn it over to Larry, who works at Datatelligent. He's our Chief Solution Officer. And he'll talk about a framework that organizations can use to become a data-driven organization. This will be followed by Sean from Tableau, who will talk about tools and existing dashboards, et cetera, that Tableau has that can help nonprofits optimize their analytics to, as you can see here, drive towards success. And finally, Larry will end up by just giving you some ideas about ways you can accelerate your data analytics journey and become, like you say, a data-driven organization. Okay, so let me start off with just going on high level, some current trends going on in the nonprofit area. So when we think about the landscape for nonprofits, we see three main themes impacting their organizations and their use of data. First is there tends to be a fragmented data strategy, and I'll explain this more in a little bit. Second, as most industries have been affected, they're dealing with the fallout from the pandemic. And finally, there's because of the pandemic, an acceleration to move towards almost a fully digital experience for their outreach. So when I talk about a fragmented data strategy, what this means is that typically nonprofits do very well organizing their data for one specific goal, such as a board presentation, but there tends to lack a unified approach to providing analytics for their whole operations, which coupled with staffing constraints lead many nonprofits to not optimize their fundraising activities and therefore not realize their full potential. You can see on the right-hand side of the slide, it's been estimated that nonprofits on average are missing out on almost $4 million in giving potential. Second, the pandemic brought along new challenges for nonprofits. They have seen an increase in demand for services, while at the same time they have suffered job losses. It's been estimated that they lost over 1 million jobs in the past year. Now that has improved a lot in the last couple quarters, but it's been estimated that it will take about 2 years to fully recover. The third area that the pandemic hit was around fundraising. Over half organizations report that they raised less money than they budgeted for 2020, in part due to events being canceled or postponed. Now, the good thing is, though, most households still gave during the pandemic, but what's different was how they did it. They did it mostly through non-cash indirect means, which is a little bit of change from traditional ways. And finally, COVID, as with a lot of industries, accelerated trends that are already going on. Nonprofits are already moving towards more of a digital platform for doing their outreach to donors and the like. But because of COVID, what we saw was an acceleration of this. You can see for 2020, majority of events that were still held were converted to a virtual fundraising event. 16 converted to a hybrid event, and overall, majority of these organizations felt that these were very successful. Interesting as well, as far as this move towards digital, if you compare the giving in 2019 versus 2020, we did see an overall 2% growth in giving, but more interesting, 21% growth in online giving, and 13% of the total fundraising came from online sources. So what that just shows is that yes, this was happening, but COVID has kind of accelerated and pushed this along. So what's interesting about why these three areas are important is all of these trends put pressure on nonprofits to better organize and use their data to run those organizations. So what I'd like to do now is just sort of pause and kind of get your thoughts on that brief kind of overview of the landscape and see what kind of pressures and concerns you have that you're dealing with. Hopefully all you can see that poll up there. So just respond, and this is a multiple choice one. So select all that apply to you or maybe none, but just let's get a sense from you guys of what you're seeing. We'll give you a few seconds to do that. Okay, Chris, can you show kind of the results?
So what we're seeing is that developing a data analytics strategy is leading with 65% of the people saying that's their #1 priority, and then meeting increased demand is coming in second.
Okay. Okay, so that's kind of consistent with kind of what we're seeing within the marketplace for nonprofits. Okay, well, let me do that. So I am now going to, let me get back on the screen here. Hand it over to my colleague, Ann Hartman, who can give you share some of her personal experiences and how she used data to improve the operations at a nonprofit that she worked at. So Ann, you can take it away.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Can you make me the presenter? For some reason, it's not letting me do it.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. I need some help here, guys. I can't get back to my screen.
Hey, Steve, can you just put your slides back up and walk through them?
Yeah, Steve, thanks. Thanks, guys. Okay, hey. So thanks, Steve. Hey, everybody. It is great to be here with you today. I'm really excited to be part of the Datatelligent team because I know from experience that nonprofits have a ton of data that they can use to tell their story and inspire donors to support their mission. So I recently joined Datatelligent after 26 years in nonprofit management. I worked for an information and referral organization in Indianapolis called Connect to Help. Our job was to connect people who needed help with the organizations that provided these services. So we managed information on thousands of organizations, so nonprofits, faith-based, governmental agencies that operated tens of thousands of programs. And so I transitioned through several roles during my time at the agency, including managing the call center, managing the resource database, performing and managing data analytics, directing the overall operations, and then finally serving as the CEO of the organization. So over the last two decades, I've had the opportunity to partner with local, state, and community-based organizations on programs to serve clients. So when I started, if we could go back just for a second, when I started at Connect to Help, it was a volunteer driven organization. So we were Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And we grew to become a 24/7, 365 statewide organization, serving hundreds of thousands of people across the state. And for those of you who may be familiar with the 211 dialing code, we were one of the largest 211 centers in the country. And I served as the vice chair of the National 211 Steering Committee. And I got to work with people all over the country and even Canada on best practices for our industry. So I'm excited to share some of those with you today. So next slide. So picking up where Steve left off. So yes, the good news is there is untapped potential to support your organization. The challenge is that there's a lot of competition for those dollars. So, so you really need to make your organization stand out. And how do you do that? So next slide. Thanks, Chris. The first thing you need is you need for your strategic plan to be a living, breathing document. Everybody on your staff needs to know that it exists, and it needs to be monitored regularly. You know, we all know that funders require a copy of a strategic plan when we apply for a grant. However, what I've seen too many times is organizations who have a plan, but they keep it in a file drawer or on their computer. And it's seen as sort of a lofty goals document. But if you don't have measurable objectives and outcomes, you can't drive your organization to success. So, and that's how organizations end up with the fragmented data strategy that Steve described earlier. Next, we have to have a compelling story. If that's the key to showing potential donors why they should invest in your organization. And that's really important to remember. A donation is an investment. Donors want to know that their dollars are having an impact in the community. And then finally, relationships with those donors is critical. Donors come in many forms. They can be individuals, philanthropic organizations, or even corporate partners. However, cultivating relationships is key. So yes, there's always that sort of one and done donation that we all make because we get hit up at work for our friend's daughter's school fundraiser. But really, the lifeblood of nonprofits is donors who continue to give. Thanks. So let's dive in just a little deeper into your strategic plan, and I'll keep it really simple. So you want to know it, you want to share it, and you want to work it. Most nonprofit strategic plans, they're sort of fairly lengthy documents, and that can make them seem overwhelming. You know, if you don't have one already, create a high-level visual of the plan with the main goals that your organization is driving toward, and then keep it somewhere that you're going to see it every day. Next, get more granular and make a list of the specific tasks that you need to accomplish to reach those goals. If working on this list with your leadership team, that'll really help keep you grounded and help you to set realistic expectations. And then once you've done these two things, you're going to know your plan inside and out. So next, share that visual with everybody on your staff. You know, every person needs to know the direction that the organization is headed. And not only does it educate them about, you know, the organization's goals, but really it helps them to feel personally invested in the results. And then delegate specific tasks to staff members and make sure to include specific dates. And then finally, you need to work the plan. Setting expectations right up front is really important. Everybody needs to be held accountable for doing their part. You know, and when they do their part, it's even more important that you share the progress that your team has made on regular intervals, because that keeps everybody interested in the process. Thanks. So if you're working your plan, the next step to making your organization stand out is going to fall right into place. You're going to have the data that you need to tell that story that's going to steer donors in your direction. Clean data is, you know, we all know it's the most critical element in this process. And I know that many of you on this webinar are data analysts, and I'm sure you've all lived through the nightmare of trying to figure out what to do with a data set that just has no structure. Sometimes it takes so long to clean the data that the time to tell your story with it, you know, has passed. But oh man, you know, we all know what you can do with clean data. So when I was a data analyst at Connect to Help, I actually had an opportunity to attend a Tableau conference. And I was blown away by all the visualizations that were presented in the different workshops. And I couldn't wait to get back to the office to show my boss what we could do with our data. I remember when I created my first simple heat map. So it was food pantry locations by zip code with an overlay of food pantry requests by zip code from our callers. And so what this did is it created this visual analysis that immediately led to the insight that, hey, we need more food pantries on the west side of Indianapolis. We could actually quantify the number of callers who went without food because they didn't have transportation and they couldn't walk because the nearest food pantry was too far away. So we shared this story with the local community center on the west side, and they shared it with a local funder who actually agreed to provide the financial resources to open a food pantry at the community center. And then the funder was so impressed with our data that we were asked to continue providing this data on an ongoing basis. So they provided us with funding that we could then use as unrestricted revenue to support our operations. So, I mean, talk about a win-win. So one of the key takeaways from that story is the word ongoing. So by providing data to the funder on an ongoing basis, we had multiple opportunities to engage with them. And the more we engaged, the more they realized that an investment in our organization was actually an investment in the community. And the same thing applies to all donors. So donors need to feel inspired. And this is where your story comes in. And then once you've inspired them, you need to find ways to continue to reach out to them. And having clean data at the ready about your donors, so their demographics, their interests, their funding priorities, et cetera, makes it easy to create quick campaigns to stay connected with them. And then when you've acquired a donor, it's even more important that you continue the multiple touches to develop that relationship. And this is what allows you to retain them as donors. And so now I'd like to hand it over to Larry so he can share how becoming a more data-driven organization is that it's not only possible, but it's actually very doable using the data maturity model. So Larry, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Ann. Appreciate it. I will share my screen. And the confirmation, you can see that.
Yes, we can.
All right. Hello, everyone. Glad to join all of you. I'm Larry Blackburn. I'm the Chief Solutions Officer for Datatelligent. And I thought that was a great summary of Ann's experience and what how we need to use data, right, and responding to some of these challenges that Steve talked about. So what I want to talk about is what does being a data-driven organization mean, and present a framework for thinking about that concept of being data-driven. So we've done a lot of research and have looked at what that means. So being data-driven is actually part of a progression toward being data-driven, right? And there's actually several steps toward becoming data-driven. So we've come up with a data maturity model that looks at those various levels of progressing toward being data-driven. So let me start with the end. What does it mean to be data-driven? And that is being data first in your thinking, where data is embedded into all decision and business making processes, right? So as I was listening to Ann, I think I heard a lot of the word data, right? You need data to do things that she's talked about. And so it's really then embedding that data into all of your processes. And also you need all of your systems and people working together to make the most effective and efficient use of that data. So that's how we define being data-driven. Most organizations are on a journey toward being data-driven. And so there are levels then to get to that data-driven level. So most organizations start out at the level we call data aware, where they're using manual non-standard reports you're rarely using data to make decisions because it might be very difficult to get, and there's a lot of manual work to get to that data. So that's just being data aware that you have data that you want to use, but maybe it's difficult to get to. The next level up from there is what we call being data proficient. So now you're using standardized reporting and you're making it easier to get the reporting distributed, and you're using a reporting platform. But then data here is only used for awareness, right? To kind of confirm this is what happened and just to raise awareness around what happened with data. And then the next level up, which is just one step away from being data driven, we call data savvy. Now you're using data to make some business decisions, right? And you've grown in your data capabilities. However, it's usually still inconsistent. And then often it's in those silos that Ann had talked about, right? You've got data for specific purposes, but it's really difficult to make it more available. So those are the steps in the data maturity model and becoming data driven. So I'm going to pause there. I believe we have a poll question to see where you think you are.
We are actually, Ann is trying to make me the host again so that I can put up the poll question.
Okay.
So one second. Right. Oh, there we go. All right. Here we go.
Okay, take a look at the data maturity model levels and think about where you are in your organization, and we'll take a second for you to choose that level. Okay, Chris, we have results?
Yep, so pretty evenly split, but data aware is leading with about 33%, followed by data savvy at 29 and data proficient at 24. We do have 3 people, 14% say they are currently data driven.
Great, all across the board. That's great. All right, so then what I want to talk about next is, now that we've defined what being data-driven means and how organizations can move toward that, what I want to talk about are some key principles that can help you come up with a plan to be data-driven. And so through our research, we come up with these 3 principles. Number 1, make data analytics transformational. Number 2, invest what you can. And 3, establish your unified approach. I'm going to go into these a little bit more in the next few pages. So making data analytics transformational, and this kind of ties back to what Ann talked about earlier, having that strategic plan that's then available to everybody, right? So you want to make your data analytics connected to your organization's mission. In other words, how can data enable your organization's mission for results that matter to everyone, right? Members, clients, leadership. Tailor the approach to your organization, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all. You really need to understand your organization's mission, culture, your organization structure, and then where you are in your analytics maturity.
Hello?
And then finally, you want to develop a roadmap for building a data-driven organization. And this is something we've worked with a lot of organizations around, and a good place to start as you're thinking about your data-driven journey. The next principle is invest what you can. So here we have, and we'll talk later about our approach, but you really want to take an iterative approach, right? You don't want to try to take on maybe a big project all at once, but think about getting some smaller wins that return immediate value, right? Slowly make that progress by taking an iterative approach to your data journey. You want to focus on solutions that bring high value. Maybe there's something that's small that could bring high value, maybe that's been on your list to do for a while, that you could start on. And then you can invest in a balance of cost-effective and timely capabilities. And then finally, you want to establish a unified approach. You want to remove those silos and expect that there will be collaboration across the entire organization. You want to empower those on the front lines with access to data and tools. And then finally, make data a strategic asset by putting it into a unified data platform. So I'll come back later and talk about how you can use those key principles to then accelerate your data maturity. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Sean with Tableau, who's going to give us some examples of how Tableau can help you with your data analytics capabilities.
Great. Thank you, Larry. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for taking time to meet today. My name is Sean Pfaff. I lead our solution engineering team here at Tableau, and I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking about what we're doing around analytics in the nonprofit space. When we think about what sits behind everything that organizations are doing, it really is data, and the data explosion that we've seen since 2010 is not slowing down. This chart here came from some data that was presented to us from IDC, and they say that the data will grow from 33 zettabytes. And being in data analytics, we don't normally think about zettabytes of data. That's a lot. If you don't know your database and data storage sizes, that's more than we can really comprehend, but it's not going to slow down. The expectation is that 33 zettabytes of data that was produced in 2018 is going to increase 5 times to 175 zettabytes by 2025. Just crazy growth. But some can look at it as a challenge, as a concern. Data-driven organizations really look at this as an opportunity, and an opportunity to do more with a resource that they have available to them just by the nature of doing business. Salesforce did a research study to determine how organizations plan to work with data to really just improve efficiencies. And we can see here that the numbers are quite staggering. At the low end, 9%, so they're more likely to exceed program delivery goals by being data mature, all the way up to 20% for exceeding fundraising goals. I don't know about you, but 20% more funds is certainly a great thing to help meet your mission, and data analytics is the way to get there. When we think about it across departments, about half of nonprofits report that they'll be able to measure their overall mission goals, and 75% say reporting and measuring data is truly a challenge. How do you get there? Well, part of it is going through what Larry mentioned as far as the maturity model that Datatelligent has, but another is just really understanding where to start. And with us here at Tableau, our goal from day one is to help people see and understand data. We take all of these columns and rows of data behind the scenes and turn it into visual analytics that can be made for anyone and understood by anyone. And as part of Salesforce now for going on 2 years, we get the benefit of bringing in some fantastic predictive technologies through Einstein Analytics and embed those directly in the Tableau product. So not only can you see what has happened in the past, you can use that history, use that data to really understand what might happen next, or to shape what's going to happen next in the future. So why data at nonprofits? Why is this something that's important to Tableau? One, being mission driven, we want to help any of our customers be successful. But for myself personally, I made a conscious choice to work with our customers at Tableau that are mission driven and working to do better in the world, whether or not that world is international in scope or blocks in scope. We know that data can be used to help certain areas, and the data that's being generated, for example, by moving inventory around, is important to really understand how to react to emerging needs and deploying personnel as quickly and efficiently as possible. You also look at other impacts, things like marketing, the impact on annual report analyses, program expansion analyses, system advocacy, policy changing, and reporting back to funders. This is all an expectation now in this new economy, and we want to do our best to remain transparent and within compliance so that we can have more funds come to us in the next go around. Well, we do this by doing analytics against the operational data that we're generating, and analytics can really help inform each portion of the nonprofit journey, as we show here, from helping identify programming gaps to informing the question of, are we doing what we think we're doing for who we think we're doing it for? Complicated, yes, but the overall operations of a nonprofit are complicated. And through this life cycle here, we're able to make sure we're meeting our compliance requirements, and then also telling the story correctly about our nonprofit to the market, which will then in turn lead to effective fundraising. Well, how can you do that with Tableau? Tableau, as an analytics organization, has really been a platform for being able to take data and do some analysis against it. Just recently, Tableau partnered with our colleagues at Salesforce.org, part of our parent company, to create some dashboard starters that can be leveraged across different areas within your organization. One area to consider is the obvious around fundraising. The other is program management. We'll dive into that in a minute here, but one of the reasons we really wanted to make data easier for nonprofits was just to get those insights out to you, to your donors, to the community, to your stakeholders. And we've done this through the intuitive environment that is Tableau, with drag and drop interfaces, allowing you to act collaboratively but securely with those stakeholders that matter, and then ultimately make decisions to drive your organization going forward. And as I mentioned, we've done this in two areas with these starter kits. One is around fundraising. So dashboards have been created to allow you to get some better insights into what's going on with revenue in the organization, donor acquisition and retention, as well as campaign performance. Now, these dashboard starters are built against the Salesforce model for our nonprofit cloud. If you're not using that, don't worry about it. You can still get these dashboards to start with, and then just map the data over to whatever data profile you're using. It's a great way to get started, and that's what these dashboard starters are intended to do, is just that, get you started on an analytics journey. The next area where we've spent some time is in program management, and this is a bit more extensive, as you can imagine, because there is a lot of complexity and nuance here. Being able to do analytics in everything from service delivery trends to intake, even down to client assessment. Very, very thorough, but gives you a great start in as you progress in your maturity to getting to being a data-driven organization. One example of a nonprofit partner we work with is called Build On, and they started using Salesforce as a solution in 2020, and then when the dashboard starters came out in 2021, implemented those for fundraising, and are seeing, as Eric says here in the bottom of his quote, they're able to unlock donor data, forecast more effectively, and visualize revenue performance. Make your data work for you. It's going to be there regardless. It is an untapped resource in more organizations, and products like the dashboard starters just help you use that untapped resource. Now, as we think about analytics, the next step is, what can we do to make analytics work with us? Not to just take data, connect to data, and analyze what may have happened, very descriptive analytics, but get into things like prescriptive analytics. Prescriptive analytics are the next step beyond predictive. So when we think about what has happened leading to what could happen, prescriptive is going to allow us to make changes so that we can basically set our own future based off of what the past data might have told us. All this is to say, when you think about analytics, it's a lot more than just the visual side of the house. It's a lot more than just creating bar charts. Extremely beneficial to create interactive bar charts, interactive analytics, but being able to use features in Tableau like Ask Data, for example, where you may not be a visually attuned person, but you know what questions you want to ask. Great, ask those in natural language. Ask them to Tableau, type them out, and it will give you an answer. Features like explain data, which will tell you what's going on behind a data point. Let's say you see a dip in donations and you want to see if there might be some data related to that dip that you could act on. That can all be done today without really requiring a lot of extra maturity around what we call this business science layer, which gets you into areas around predictive modeling. When you get into that route, not only can you see what's going on behind the scenes, but use models that Tableau can generate to tell you what may happen. That is that next step in the maturity model for data, but one that you can get to quickly. And Tableau helps make it easy. It doesn't require you to be a data science to start using predictive models. If you are an organization that does have data scientists engaged, take it up many, many notches here by leveraging your own models that you may have created in something like R or Python or MATLAB, and embedding those directly in Tableau and doing interactive predictions based off of your data in areas like we're showing here. Now, this is general to all the industries that we work in, but there are certainly analogs to what you do day in and day out. Sales is related to fundraising. So if you just put that lens around fundraising on the sales side, HR and operations tied to program management, there really isn't any data point that can't be predicted against, particularly if we have some history. So it's something exciting to think about as you get into your journey and you want to do more with data beyond just standard analytics. Think about how you could use those data points for some prediction. And as we go into it, I want to give a real brief example of what we've done in Tableau with a very short live demo here. Taking a look at some basic fundraising data, we'll take a look at what Tableau is making available in this space. So this is a simple dashboard we built against some sample data that gives me a high-level view into what's going on within my organization, allowing me to look at pledge amounts by different fundraising programs, and then seeing trends over time. Looking at the types of donors that we have in the bubble chart on the right here, I can go through and do some analysis and just visually see some trends. As we look at bar charts, we can see which of our different campaigns are doing better than others just because of the length and size of that bar chart. But there's a lot behind the scenes as far as propensity to give, commitment to donations, how often we would go after specific donors, how receptive they are to certain programs. That's a lot of analysis that I have to do in my own head. Well, if we take something like Einstein, which is our prediction model in Tableau, hook it into our data behind the scenes, it allows us to do some predictions on what may or may not happen as we go through the data. So I can still do my analysis visually here, but then also use something like Einstein to look at predictors that are behind a score here of an increase in donation amounts, and then what we can do to improve it. So looking at certain attributes within the data, if we increase or decrease the values in those data, maybe we go after certain markets instead of others, we ignore for a given campaign a certain type of donor, but we focus our energy on another, predictions can help us. And it's using your data as an example of what can happen. And also, this, as you can imagine, is fully interactive. So as I start to change the different types of donor categories that I look at, that context changes, and Tableau is aware of how the predictions would change based off of what we've seen come from this category of friends, for example. So our amount is less. And then there are also some different predictors that we can look at as well. And it doesn't require me to have to go to a separate product. I can do all of my analytics from normal visual analytics that we're used to and combine predictive all in one spot. So with that, Larry, I want to thank everybody for your time today. Turn it back to you to close this out.
All right, thanks, Sean. Let me share my screen again. And, all right, confirm you can see my screen again.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm going to wrap it up with a last section on accelerating your data analytics maturity. Hopefully what you have seen that being data-driven is possible. And it really doesn't require a lot. And what we want to do is talk about how, with our partnership with Tableau, Datatelligent can help you accelerate your data analytics maturity and get some quick wins, as we were talking about earlier. So I want to come back to those 3 principles that we saw earlier: making data analytics transformational, investing what you can, and then establishing a unified approach. So we at Datatelligent saw these 3 principles and said, how can we come up with an approach that makes it easy for organizations to become data-driven? And so what we did is that we came up with a new way to offer a service. It's a subscription-based service, which is different than a time and materials approach. And said with this, what we want to have is speed, right? Quick time to value. We want to produce results in the first 60 to 90 days. We also want it to be flexible so that it's cost effective and it's predictable what your costs are. And then also at the same time, flexible to respond to changing needs. And finally, as I said, we want to make it easy. And so we want to make this one-stop shop approach to all of your data analytics needs. And we want to include everything from data to analytics. So that is our new way. And what is included in this service are 3 things. You get our partnership, and what we do in that partnership is that we will help you create that roadmap that we talked about earlier and make sure that you can be successful with your data analytics. And then you get our people who have deep analytics knowledge and a full range of services. And then those can be flexible as needed, right, to really operationalize your data analytics. And then finally, we want to help you build your unified platform that I talked about earlier. So with that, and I'll explain a little bit more, we have solution engines for nonprofits. We also understand how to connect to those data sources for nonprofits. And then we can help you manage your data operations. So coming back to those 3 principles then, our partnership ties to making data analytics transformational. In other words, we're going to help you create that strategic roadmap that enables your organization's strategy using data. And then with the second principle is invest in what you can, we provide a flexible model or approach to resources. And we do want to work with you to take an iterative approach to your solutions. And then finally, we help you, as I said, establish that unified platform. So all of that is included in our subscription service. The other way that we accelerate your data maturity is what we call solution engines. Think of these as templates that address these 5 areas of your organization, your nonprofit organization. And we've actually worked with Anne quite a bit to say, hey, what are the critical areas, and she described some of those earlier, that nonprofits need to have solutions. And also you saw a little bit of this with Sean's Tableau starter. So we have partnered with Tableau. We would bring in some of those starters that Tableau has, and then we would also use our experience in developing these solutions. So under strategy and operations, we have what we call an agency health dashboard. So think of this as a overview of your entire organization's key strategies and the metrics that help you understand your progress toward those key strategies. So it's converting those strategies to metrics, which I believe Anne talked about earlier. And then there's always, we also always want to keep an eye on your financial performance. So providing a budget to forecasting solution. The next area is important, which is client service, really understanding those client outputs and outcomes, right? How are you measuring your performance in terms of your clients' outcomes? And then also, as Ann talked about earlier, that community impact, right? What kind of impact are you able to measure through your client service? The third area we call staff engagement. So this is your organizational staff and understanding your staffing trends and especially retention, right? As we reopen, the job market is changing. And so we want to make sure that we are able to understand the retention of your staff. And then also the engagement's important, right? And getting feedback from your staff and measuring that against some goals that you may have. The fourth area, fund development, Sean demonstrated a solution here. We have a solution to understand your fundraising pipeline and understand the opportunities in that pipeline, and then how effective are you in closing those opportunities. And then also looking at donors, understanding your donors and profiles, and also their movement, right? Which ones are lapsing, and you want to understand what kind of outreach you could do, as well as identifying those that are reoccurring so that you can retain those. And then the final area is marketing. And right, this is your looking at all of your marketing campaigns, the effectiveness of those campaigns, and then also looking at the effectiveness of your social media activities. And so we know how to connect to those different social media channels such as Google and Facebook and all of that to bring that data in and understand what's going on there. Okay. So I'm going to pause there. Chris, you want to, yep. So looking at these 5 areas, which area, and I believe, can this be multiple, Chris? Do you need the most help with? Oh, just one. Okay, you have to pick one. What is the most critical need that your organization has, if you could choose one?
Looks like strategy and operations is leading by far, fund development coming in second.
All right, great. So I want to close with a special offer that we're making available to you in attending this webinar. So we've partnered with Tableau to come up with a package we're calling the Mission Multiplier, right? And so what we want to do is enable your growth through our solutions and partnership with Tableau. So think of Tableau then as your software to enable your maturity. And so with Tableau, what's included in that is that you get a 12-month license, an annual license that includes 3 creators. These are licenses you would need to be able to create and develop solutions. And then 5 explorers and 50 viewers, so you can then distribute those solutions to your users. And then the data management component helps you create those data connections using Tableau. And then we, at Datatelligent, would then think of us as your partner, right? And what I described earlier, you get our partnership, our people, and platform. So by working with us, then you're able to leverage Tableau, plus look at your data and bring the data in that you need for these solutions. We create that data maturity roadmap so that we understand how we're going to build some long-term data capabilities for your organization. We want to ensure you're successful with data analytics, so we create a success plan. And then we would work with you in those 90 days, again, going back to iterative and then getting immediate value. We would identify one of those solution engines that you saw earlier to then build with you in those first 90 days. And what's included in that solution engine, so think of those as templates. And then we also include any data connections or data pipelines, as we call them, to be able to connect to the right data sources to enable those solutions. So we're making this offer to you for attending the webinar. If you're interested in a follow-up on this package, go ahead and drop your name in the comment section, and then we'll follow up with you. Okay, with that, thank you for your time from all of us as presenters. Appreciate your time today. Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you to close.
All right, thank you, everyone. Go ahead and drop your name in the comments or in the question section, and we will be sure to get back with you. Again, this was recorded, so I will send this out to everyone. And thank you again for attending.